Imagine a jazz musician improvising on a theme. Then imagine that he or she is able to play half a dozen instruments, not one after another, but almost simultaneously, switching effortlessly between instruments and musical styles with hardly a pause for breath. If you can countenance that, then you're halfway towards appreciating the extraordinary song of the nightingale. Welcome, folks, to If I Rule the World, episode 30, the System Change podcast, which looks at the many ways that people from all walks of life, areas of expertise, backgrounds, belief systems, you name it, all the ways that people are working to make the world a better place. So we are 30 episodes into this podcast, and we've only just scratched the surface of the almost inexhaustible touch points into this concept of system change. And yes, last episode, God, the conversation with activist and sci-fi writer Cory Doctorow was a ride and blew the artful splodger's mind, or at least that's his Instagram handle. And it did ours too. But I thought his comment really captured, I'm assuming artful splodger is a he, by the way. Yeah, the comment captured, I think, what a lot of us were feeling. Artful splodger writes, "This episode blew my tiny mind. It was so fast-paced, brackets Cory is a dynamo. I couldn't take it all in. I'll need to listen again, but ... The idea that society has gone from feudalism, and I'm going to add medieval feudalism, to capitalism, to feudalism 2.0, basically 21st century tech feudalism, as Cory suggests we're living in now. And then the artful splodger just ends with a string of mind-blown emojis, which was pretty much the look on our faces, guys. So that's me and the team, producer Sam and Jake. When we finished that interview, we literally were like, we didn't know what hit us. And I am so glad that that episode landed with so many of you, because it was definitely a paradigm shifting conversation. But for today, you might have guessed from the little quote at the top of this episode from, by the way, none other than possibly the most admired and respected naturalist in the UK, Brett Westwood. We're back in familiar territory in nature, which, let's face it, no matter what area of system change we cover on this podcast, all roads lead to nature. And we just concluded a really crappy COP 30, 29, I've even lost track of the number of climate conferences we've had, multiple ongoing genocides, and just crazy making politics the world over. So I thought today what we needed was Sam Lee. Mercury Prize-nominated musician, folk singer, song collector, and activist. Sam has carved out a really unique niche in the British music scene. He's blurred boundaries, not just in music genres, but also by staging performances in nature, outdoors, in concert with nature, literally making music with nature, stepping into the forest at night, lantern in hand, to duet with a singing nightingale. So I chose that quote for the top of this episode because although these birds are shy and secretive, in the spring, when they arrive here after their winter migration, they'll be tucked away in dense scrub and woodland, where they love to sing their beautiful song right into the dead of night. Clearly a musician's bird. The nightingale is a red-listed species. It's now in decline in Britain, but these birds once lived large in this landscape, but also in the national psyche. And the record of this is held in the music, in folklore and folk music and culture and literature. So this is the gateway into what is a nourishing, grounding, subtle system change conversation about the power of song to help reach the places that science cannot reach. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Sam Lee.
I thought she was an angel bright, come tripping down so low.
What do you think we need to know about you in order to kind of really appreciate Sam Lee?
I'm really an activist, most of all, and it's taken me a lifetime already to appreciate what that means and why that is. But I come to this work as a singer, as a song collector, and someone who works with the British folk traditions, and having spent my adult life gathering songs, learning them, particularly from the Gypsy Traveller community, going through that world of discovering intangible cultural heritages, not just from the British Isles, I must say, but specifically focusing on Scots, Irish, English song. But then also coming before that from a background of nature connection. I've been a great nature lover and went into a career as a in my end of teens and early 20s of working in the realm of discovering about plant medicine, medicinal plants, wilderness skills, bushcraft, indigenous practices from around the world of relationship to nature. And they've come together, these two worlds of the kind of vernacular song and what that means as a sort of community builder shaped by the community, and also how our relationship to nature, which is in such a desperate and complex and beleaguered state these days, certainly in this part of the world, how we can work with reimagining our own indigenous cultural traditions from these lands as being part of a reconciliation process and a repair work in how we can get towards a better stewardship of our land.
So you say, first and foremost, you're an activist, and these are the tools of your trade, I guess, in one way. A good question then would be, if you're an activist, what is it that you are trying to take action about? What are the things? I mean, we've touched a little bit on nature, but I just wondered, a big part of this podcast is about really trying to identify what the barriers are to positive change. I mean, my sort of assertion is I've been doing this type of work, not necessarily podcasting, but I've worked in natural history filmmaking for all my adult life. And it feels, the podcast, it was born out of a frustration, if you like, of going, well, I started off doing this thinking that all it was going to be was like, people just need to know how beautiful the natural world is, how wondrous it is. We are just such a small part of this incredible, I don't know, I'm trying not to drop into all the cliches, but just web of life, why not? It works. And then I just found it seems to me that people care more than we give them credit for sometimes. People are concerned about the shape of things. So the question for me is, why haven't things changed? And I'm sure there's many answers to that question, but how would you come at that question?
Well, so many questions that you've posed there. Why do we not care as much as we should? And how can we bring upon a greater sense of, consideration? How do we make nature and environmental protection more relevant? Something that people are so deeply passionate about that they will change. They will change their lives. They'll change their habits. We live in such an incredible and culturally diverse, and the things that people spend their times and money on these days is so unbelievably varied that I am aware very much that I'm not going to be able to reach everybody as an artist, as a spokesperson, but really, in honouring of what you're doing here, we need better stories, and we need to up our game as storytellers. I often talk about creating this sense of the irresistibility of the natural world, of irresistible ways that we can connect in. And this word connect is so complex, and it is overused. And what does it mean? And story is where I come back to. Ultimately, I spent my adult years discovering that what I am is a storyteller. I do it through song, but I also do it through the narratives and the honouring of where those moments have happened in our cultural and ancestral lives that have left indelible marks on our identities. And I go back. For me, it's about touching in with the roots. I'm a very modern and forward-thinking person, and use all the technology and techniques that the music industry has, and the social media, and this wonderful modern world that we live in. I'm grateful to be alive in today. I love returning back to the source. That's what I did as a song collector, going to the elders and going to find out how can we take the wisdom of past that is not perfect at all, and not comprehensive, but actually how can we take some of the essence of that and reimagine, retrofit, reupholster these old songs and these old ideas into an adapted sort of way of reminding us where we've come from, why we are who we are, and making some complicated and sometimes slightly awkward questions, posing of how have we stopped being this, and what have we lost, and where are we now because of that? And you start to look at the points in our history of where separation and nature has been removed or exploited, extracted, and we start looking at, wow, what have we lost as being part of us being humans, as part of nature? And maybe there's a key in this old material, in the songs that I sing and the way I arrange them, and the event and the experiences that I do to use music to invoke a sort of ancient sense of connectedness. How do we get to this point where that's not part of our life anymore?
Well, you said something earlier which really struck me, because you said you try to go back to source, and I mean that could mean a lot of things to different people. But when I first heard about your work, your music, it was going back to source, which was actually going back to nature, and you created sort of music with nature, specifically nightingales, and a lot of your music pulls in sounds of the natural world, bird song, etc. Can you just talk us through, like, when you started thinking that was something you wanted to do, and how does this make sense musically? Am I going to, really, like your latest, the release that this year, which is Bushes, Briars and Birds, that literally says, Sam Lee featuring nature. So how have you managed to bring that into your music making?
Well, my God, I mean, this is the thing, it's every point in the process as an artist. And I'll start at the back, at the most recent. You bring up this song, Bushes and Briars and Birds. This was a song that I wrote out of a folk song for my album that came out this year called Song Dreaming, which is an album entirely devoted to nature and our love songs about our kind of our place within the natural world and troubled natural world. And this is a remix that I did where I've basically created an orchestra of birdsong made out of some of our rarest and most threatened and most beautiful singers' birdsong, and added it as a kind of as a chorus over this song. And I did that with an organisation called Earth Percent, who I'm very close to, founded by Brian Eno, the legendary producer and musician, who's founded this organisation that is getting nature as a recognised artist. So royalties from this song are now being diverted towards Earth Percent to be distributed towards ecological charities and initiatives. Wonderful way that the arts can start to honour the earth. And I have now added nature as a collaborator. She on Spotify is an artist. And me and the cohorts of other musicians that have been given this wonderful role of being the kind of pioneers of this process have been started to incorporate nature sounds within our music. Now, this is just one enormous but unique place where the modern world has managed to kind of, separate nature from creativity. The rest of my music is going back to nature as the original inspirer, the muse. My music comes from the tradition, and the tradition comes from a time where our inseparableness from the natural world was irrefutable, from a time where we depended on the work of our own hands, the harvests, the working in collaboration and sympathy and deep attunement to nature to make sure we had enough to survive. And that required all of our senses and stories and initiatives to be paying attention. We've outsourced all of that nowadays. We don't need to. Nature isn't somebody else's issue and problem and mechanical role to plow and seed and sow and reap and mow, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. And actually I'm sort of returning to this kind of, well, actually what's happened because of that, and what if we can start to find ways today through our songs of starting to be reminded of what it meant to be in attunement, to be in a place of kinship, and actually what does that make us feel? And actually, do we really need it right now? Because are we living in a state of terrible mental health, of appalling futures, societal, that's uncertainty, and are we actually living our best and happiest lives? And maybe there's something to do with it. Maybe, yes, there are the privileged few who have access and are having a good time and don't really care about what's to happen, but actually the global majority, and particularly the global south, are seeing the ravishing of landscapes on account of the rampant expansion and greed and of the Western capitalist model. And so are we really doing the right thing, or do we have to sort of change? And can music be part of that invitation to think about change? God, I keep on going from the small and that, I'm just writing a bloody song, but I'm also trying to change the world.
Oh my God, tell me about it. It's really hard to ignore though, because I guess one of the things that's come with all this tech, that we can peer into the lives of people on the other side of the planet. We can observe, what's going on, like almost to the point of like individual, like a square inch of land on the earth from the sky, from space. The ability to surveil like everything all at once is almost like mind-bending. So I think that may be part of what we're sort of contending with. And so my sort of thought is like, your art is sort of leaning into an ancient sort of rich legacy in terms of like British Indigenous storytelling and folk song. Why look backwards to look to the future? What value does that have in your mind?
Yeah, God, why have I found myself singing old English songs? I don't have a drop of English blood in me. I'm a complete migrant from a few generations back. This land has adopted me. It's cared for me. It's created a sanctuary for my family to live in, and I'm deeply grateful for that. We were Eastern European Jewish refugees fleeing torture and genocide and hate in the East. So we're one of many stories, and that for me has always comes with a sense of gratitude that these islands have become my home, and I've grown up in accordance with the trees and the plants and the landscapes and the mountains here and the valleys there and the chalk streams over here and the Welsh hills, and they formed me, and they speak in a different sense of time. That this idea of the future and where are we going and what's next is irrelevant. The natural world lives in the presence, but it also holds the potentiality for the future and also the legacy of the past. And there's a wonderful prophecy and mythical bird that I've loved called the Sankofa bird from the Dinka people that flies with its head looking backwards. And this idea that we need to look at our past to be able to know where we're going. And I think at the speed in which this world goes, which I love. I'm a speed junkie. I'm not going to deny this. I love. Yeah. I'm definitely 160 BPM sort of human.
Seriously.
But also, I like slowness too.
Yeah.
But we need that honouring of who we are, where we've come from, and not just from which bit of England, but from all around the world. I'm making music that is very globally minded. My inspirations come from music from around the world. I just happen to be the language that I sing in, and the themes originate more from here. But yeah, the orchestration, the instrumentation that I have with me is very world music in its well, with Syrian kununs, Scandinavian hardangers, and nickel harpers, and pianos, and strings, and all sorts of things that are representing a kind of much more wonderful diversity and global sound.
So you duet, if you like. I don't know if that's the right word, but with the nightingale, which is actually an interesting bird for me, because I really came to live in the UK as an adult when I came to do my degree in biology. And I remember walking, I did my degree in Bristol, so I used to walk across the bridge, the suspension bridge, into Lee Woods. And as you go past Lee Woods, or heading into Lee Woods, there's a beautiful old thatched cottage. You could not get more quintessentially English than that. And it was called Nightingales.
Yeah, I know the space.
And and so for me, as someone who grew up in Kenya, especially my younger days, like the name Nightingale was actually just a family. It was like a white Kenyan family. So it took me a long time to associate the name Nightingale with the bird, and then sort of realizing it holds this kind of special place in British sort of folk culture, that sort of poetry and song that's sort of arisen around the song of the nightingale. And you've very much taken your inspiration from that. So just, that's my kind of segue into nightingales. Like that's what they were to me until I realized that they have so much meaning here that I completely missed growing up in Kenya. Yeah. What was your introduction to nightingales?
Oh, well, like you, they just sort of appeared. I actually came to them firstly in folk song. I'd never heard a nightingale. I didn't know what they looked like. I just kept on learning songs, and there was a line in them, and so many of them goes, and it was early in the spring and the nightingale did sing, or one of these kind of, it was a decorative gesture. It was like an ornament of, but actually, back to what I was saying earlier, it was a marker of, okay, look, here's a species that in the old times everybody knew, and everyone knew who nightingale was and what nightingale meant. So when you put a line like that in the song, it's a sort of note to singer, like, we're in a particular time of year, it's fertile, the land is coming to life, the blossom is on the trees, the best singer in the whole world has returned. And all this was like, as I got to know more about nightingales as a bird, I realized, wow, these songs are carrying deep, large amounts of implied knowledge. Of course, then I learned that nightingales aren't just England, they're all across the Northern Hemisphere. Our ones go and live half their life in Senegal and Sierra Leone, but the ones out in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, they all come to Kenya and winter in Kenya. So they're a Kenyan bird as well, though. But how would we know that?
I guess we do now, but like for me, I guess that is sort of one of the interesting things about these migratory birds. Like they sort of, when you're here, it feels like they're British birds or European birds. And then when whether it's West Africa, East Africa, for me, it's like, what would be the name of them? Like I've learned so much of my natural history in English, from a very British perspective. So like I almost have to go, I need to reacquaint myself with this bird from a different perspective, or both perspectives, because I sort of feel like I'm a bit like the nightingale. I have my foot in both continents in a sense. But of course, this is where they show up here, is through their song. I mean, they're quite a sort of unremarkable bird if you were just to look at them, right? But it's the song that really gets them. But it's a song that not many people will be familiar with now. So it's the idea of that archive of information is captured in folk song and traditional song, and a reminder, an echo from the past, like, you're missing something, guys. So when you did that, your first night with the nightingale, like, how did that come about, that concert?
Well, I'd listened to them for many years. Every year I would go and make a pilgrimage to find one. And then in 2014, I wrote to the BBC to say, you do know that you've got a very important anniversary, 90 years since the first ever live radio broadcast. And they gave me a commission to make a little radio documentary. And I went out into the Sussex woods, found a friendly landowner who would let me come with a few musicians and a radio producer. And we made a 14-minute program that went out at the very same time, 90 years to the date of when Beatrice Harrison played her cello at the Nightingale. And we honoured this legendary musician. She was the muse of Elgar. We honoured her great moment of creating what was the kind of first ever viral media experience that was listened to by millions of people around the world on the brand new technology, the wireless, the radio. And while doing that, and playing this lovely folk song with the Nightingale, suddenly the Nightingale started to change his song and respond with us and come into collaboration and sympathy. And I nearly stopped playing. I could not believe what was happening. This bird wasn't flying away. He was actually acknowledging us and listening. And, there and then, my life changed. I knew instantly, as I like to put it, you can't bring Muhammad to the mountain, so you bring the mountain to Muhammad. And so that very thicket, that bit of blackthorn in that very bit of land in Sussex, I chatted to the landowner. I said, can I come back next year and can I bring a few people? And it's those few people have turned into 1,500 people a year, 40 people a night, come and make that blackthorn bush the theatre and sing with that very bird or his brothers and cousins and and sons.
I mean, that is actually, being in concert with in dialogue with another non-human species is pretty special. I mean, we take it for granted, I guess, maybe with our pets and stuff, but with a wild animal, that is you're sort of hoping that you can do that on their terms. And the fact that it has that choice, he has that choice to leave and chose not to, and chose to sing and actually change its song is pretty special.
And I think one of the things I love about this Nightingale space, even though we don't do many events where the audience are able to join in, I keep that with a little bit myself and the guest musician, because it's a very sensitive thing and we have to protect the birds and not interfere with their mating ritual too much. So I'm very precious about it. But actually what I think it's working at is dissolving that sense of the other. And I think everyone feels at that point when they're there with the bird that they're part of the music and they're part of that there is no pedestal here, and that we are part of nature for starters, and nature is part of us, and we are a little bit Nightingale, and Nightingale is a little bit human as well. And I think those are the experiences that give us a sense of permissiveness and ability to imagine the world is much more different than we've been led to believe. And why have we arrived at this place of separation, of otherness?
You said, I mean, it's actually quite a difficult thing to talk about, because in a way you almost want to just hear the music, right? But I'm starting to get that sense of, because you said right at the beginning that I know my music isn't for everyone. But I think that's an interesting thing, because it might not be for everyone, but it will reach the places that, say, the science doesn't reach. The logical brain, the thinking brain doesn't necessarily reach. Would you say, though, do you operate from a place where you can see a future that you're trying to help create? Or are you operating from a place where you're simply just trying to, connect and then let people figure it out? Like, is there a future that you would like to see happen? I mean, I guess in a way, this sort of is sort of leaning into the title of the podcast, which is, if you rule the world, what would you do? If you had all the power in the world, do you know how you'd shape it? Or, how would you go about creating a future based on this beautiful kind of way of working with the past that you've shaped for yourself, really? Like, how would you do that?
How would I do it? Wow, how long have you got? I mean, it's
No, we got time.
it's my life. My life has been about finding examples of where, for me, beauty and harmony exist in community, in the landscape, in such a way that, and understanding why that is, why they've been allowed to exist, and where are the bits of the world that it doesn't exist, and why is that? And this is a social revolution we need here. I go every year to Romania, to the Carpathian Mountains. I track bison there. I lead a group out there into that the last of the European wilderness. And I remember the first time I went there and I stepped into the meadow pastures, I burst into tears because I had never seen a meadow as rich and as humming and as verdant as this. Everything I'd ever seen in England that I thought was the best it got was paltry in comparison to what it can look like if we let nature do its thing. And the abundance that comes, bears feasting on giant raspberry bushes, and wolves taking wild boar down, and bison in their herds of 40 and 50 munching and trashing their way through the scrub. And it's like, why do we not have that here anymore? And for good reasons, bad reasons. But how can we create an ecology in this land where and for me it really comes down to farming. I'm just the radio and the tractor kind of stuff. For me, it's about the nature work that is so important to be rethinking how we work with the land, making space for nature. We can feed ourselves so abundantly with the amount of land we have, yet we've got absolutely absurd farming policies and systems. And I'd love to see a world where we actually started to look at how can we create alternative income for landowners, and opportunities for experience and art and creativity and exploration and nature appreciation in a land that is filled with flocks of pelicans, of beavers in their thousands, and bison and lynx and maybe even wolves.
So, Sam, you are also the founder of a huge movement in this country, the Right to Roam. So, like, for our international listeners, can you just put that into context? What does that mean, and what are its aims?
So England, specifically England, not Scotland, that does have a right to roam. England, you are not allowed to go into the countryside unless you're on a road or you're on a footpath. And those are pre-designed. So it means that you can't go and swim in a river. You can't walk across, a beautiful bit of meadow or through forest and things unless it's got some sort of public access to it. And that's a tiny, tiny percentage of the land mass. So most of the countryside is off limits, and it's a civil offence to break that law. It's not a criminal offence, but a civil offence. But what we have is this attitude from landowners that people are the enemy, and destructive and disrespectful. And it's a massive part of why we have such a huge nature deficit disorder and sense of disenfranchisement from the natural world, and a lack of care, because actually most of the damage that's being done is by water companies and farmers, big farmers, with chemical practices and polluting the land and the rivers and killing the insects off. And we're watching this destruction just happen under our watch, or we're not watching it because we can't see it because we're being deprived access to it. So the Right to Roam is about a policy change in England to revert to the Scottish practice, whereby we have, with duty and responsibility, we call this the wild service, this set of like what it is to have permission, to be allowed the permission to move through the land undestructively, and thus paying attention to where ecological crime is happening, where destruction is happening, because you can. So a whole change in the legal rights of nature, basically. This is about the rights of nature and our right of access to nature.
I just want to jump in here quick to mention our exclusive sponsors. Triodos Bank UK, an ethical and sustainable bank that's working really hard to be an authentic alternative for people who care and want to know their money isn't being used to harm the environment or their fellow humans. So Triodos use funds that come solely from customers depositing money in their bank accounts, so current accounts, savings, ISAs, etc. And they only lend to projects and enterprises that can demonstrate a positive environmental impact and cultural impact too. So they're completely transparent about this. They list all the organizations that they finance on their website, and they have like full transparency and honest impact reporting, which is what makes Triodos the benchmark in the ethical banking sector, and is what makes me really proud to say that Triodos Bank UK is the exclusive sponsor of If I Rule the World. With each episode, you get to kind of play around with some ideas. So you get 3 policies, sort of like flagship policies. Obviously, you'll get more, but flagship policies that you would get to roll out as rule of the world. And what would they be?
Intensive farming. I'm just going to say it. Cheap meat. Bad meat. Unhappy animals. I want there to be good meat available, but meat that's actually doing what it's meant to do, which is do a service to the land. Chickens, pigs and cows, they're all supposed to be on this land. Incredible what a cow can do to create abundance. That'd be one thing I'd get rid of. What would I else? I'd put nature on the national curriculum, in a really thought out way that meant that every child didn't just have access, but was part of their life was about being in the kind of like the forest school, that they had time with experienced, trained initiators in nature connection, in playfulness, so that we created a generation of young people who had had their most joyful experiences in their youth playing with each other in natural settings.
Did you have that growing up?
I did a little. Yeah, I did, because my parents, I was very lucky. I was an urban inner city London kid, and my parents found a charity that took me out on the summers on summer camp. It's called Forest School Camps. It took kids from all walks of life.
Oh, yeah.
It's not Forest School, it's Forest School Camps. And I was very lucky, and I found nature, and I was safe there. I wasn't a popular kid, and I didn't have an easy childhood in the school system, and nature became my haven and where I thrived. And my parents recognised that and supported it. And luckily in central London, there's a lot of parks and green spaces. So I wasn't that far away. And it was the 80s and 90s. So you could just leave your parents at 11 years old and wander the streets and go exploring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were policy 3.
Policy 3 would be, okay, kind of going back to education again, actually. I'd make end of year for schools in the beginning of April, and from April through May and June into July would be summer holidays, because those are the beautiful months when nature is most profound. And then July just settles down a bit and gets a bit boring, and the birds go quiet, and it's nice, but it's not much going on like compared. So I want that to be the time when we center our calendar around creating more time to appreciate. When it's like a May evening or daytime, and kids are like revising for their exams, or people are in offices, and like nature is just like basically having sex out there, and it's an orgy that everyone's welcome to. I'm like, where are we? What are we doing?
I know exactly what you mean. I actually find it just really, it's almost like the Pied Piper sort of showed up and hoovered up all the kids, because that's how it feels, that time of year that you're describing, where you head out and yeah, you got, without wanting to sound ageist, but you've got a lot of retirees out and sort of adults being quiet and subdued and enjoying the sunshine in their sort of very adult way. And you're like, where are the kids? This is amazing. They need to be out here. So I think that's a really good shout, moving the main summer holidays early in the year, which everyone has noticed the second that schools are out. it's basically rain until they go back to
Totally.
school. So yeah, I think a lot of people would be up for that.
I shall start a petition, Gillian.
Indeed. Here we go. This is how we change the world. Little steps. I mean, interestingly, music. Is there space for music in your vision of the world?
I mean, it's so boring. It just comes down to funding. Like, why I work, luckily, I get to work in all different countries around the world. And particularly looking at Europe and Scandinavia and North America, particularly Canada, they're funding for the arts. If you're an artist, no matter how much success you have had or not had, if you want to go make an album, you put in an application and you're supported. And the trickle down is that there are loads of people who benefit from that funding as well. In this country, you have to fight tooth and nail to get anything out of the state. The Arts Council are, but drained of cash, organisations shutting down. Like, we just need investment, and there is money out there. There's money to make HS2 so that people in tech can get to Birmingham 8 minutes quicker. What about creating a thriving, funded creative industry that can travel the world, and Britain can continue to lead it because it's not anymore in the arts? I just think music needs cash, basically. That is, money's a dirty stuff, but actually it's the energy. And if you can't feed yourself, I'm seeing too many musicians who are becoming painter decorators because they can't make ends meet.
So, I mean, don't forget, you are ruler of the world, Sam. So you would have the global tax pot at your disposal. So you could fix a lot of these things. Like, how would you allocate it?
The arts and nature, not just music as well here, theatre, dance, the creative industries, all of it needs better support. Hey, just tax the rich. It's deeply unpopular. Tax the rich, tax Bezos, let's look at where our money is being sucked out of the system, because we're not short of cash. The world is not short of cash. It's just going to the wrong places, into the wrong people who are accruing that wealth, that conversion of minerals, of forest. It's just turning into Bitcoiny crap stuff.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting phenomenon. It's actually something a number of past guests on the podcast have mentioned, this kind of the rise of the billionaire class, while people with incredible skills are having to, not that there's anything wrong with being a painter decorator, but if that's not what you want to be, then I guess there is a problem with that, And I do wonder, when you say tax the rich, as you say, it's deeply unpopular, but is there a sort of a power in being able to identify more precisely who those people are, and why is it that we seem to do more of the things that are taking us in a direction, the opposite direction where we think we need to go? If we want a livable planet, why is it that we keep getting almost glamorizing the people that seem to be taking us in the opposite direction? Do you have any sense of where that comes from?
Well, I don't know. You have to be a social philosopher and forensic scientist to kind of unpick how we worship the idols that we do. And it's that wonderful meme going, the enemy doesn't arrive on boats, in the thousands in boats from foreign countries. The enemy arrives in the yacht. And that's sort of let's start to rethink, actually, why do we feel so threatened? And why are we tricked into believing that Donald Trump is going to make America great again? Of course he bloody won't. I don't think that the Labour Party will either. They might make it slightly less bad than it has been for the last 15 years. But I wish I was better at economics and understanding the complexity of the system and where it's open to exploitation and manipulation. Lobbying is the most horrific thing that goes on. About those with money and power can buy the influence of those with their attention on policy. Well, that's just one example of where nothing is sacred, and actually where are our best interests, our actual national and international best interests at heart, and why is it that people are trying to make policy change where it's super important. Last night I was with Jojo Mehta, the director of Stop Ecocide, and hearing her ferocious campaign to get ecocide entered into international law and then to be adopted at national levels by different countries. And my God, it's been such a hard fight to create something. That would be my other, if I ruled the world, you'd just make ecocide a law, punish people for the destruction of the environment. That would change everything.
So that's an interesting one, because in a way, you started off by saying, I wish I was better at understanding all these things. But then you've actually landed very quickly in something that I think we all kind of get, like lobbying is pretty, like, I think by another name, it would be bribery, perhaps, It does sound an awful lot like that to me. I mean, I'm no expert, but so there's a sense for me that actually quite often we sort of feel like, oh, it's too big, it's too complicated, I'm not in my lane. But I think even if it's just a kind of an instinct, a sense of where the problems are, I think a lot of people do actually have a good intuition of the practices that are not serving us, right? So would that be something you would ban as rule of the world? Lobbying? Just say we're not doing that anymore?
Okay, so there is that other side of it, which is, it's easy for me to say this as like the activist waving my face, ban this, ban that, stop this, It's always more complex than that. And I am the wisdom of that I once heard of this kind of what we exile will always have power over us. There will be another way. And so I think it's not enough just to sort of say that can't happen anymore. What we have to do is have a revolution of why would anybody want to do that? But that would
I like that.
Could we bring about a change in society of care, and that if you are not doing something that's going to better the community and the people at the closest to the edge and most vulnerable, then why would you ever think to do that? Why would that be acceptable? That we have a higher moral position as a people. So that's really what, that's why as an artist you can kind of think and approach right to the heart, because if you make someone feel something deep enough, they won't go and destroy the things that we all love because they've started to love it too. That's the nature of the Nightingale Project, is that we can't protect nightingales until we love them, and we can't love them until we know them. So I'm bringing in that, I'm just a matchmaking service. I'm trying to make people fall in love with nightingales.
But I get that, because I do think, it's more than knowing them, it's loving, because the knowing is like the science, being a naturalist, that will take you a very long way to sort of becoming acquainted with something. But there is something extra, which is the falling in love, which is actually really hard to do to me anyway, with the thinking brain. And perhaps that's the power of song, the power of the arts. Yeah, I love that. I love that you get this evolved collective consciousness to such a point where you don't have to ban bad practice. People just wouldn't want to do it in the first place. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. So you've given us your policies. We've arrived at a place where we don't need to ban anything, because everyone just gets that sense, like, why would we want to do it in the first place? We get to a point where you've had your time as leader of the world. We're not into dictatorships here. You get to nominate a successor, someone or a group of people that you think are going to be able to steward the planet towards a better place. Like, any sense of who that would be? How would you even go about selecting those people?
Oh, yeah. Not people.
Oh,
not
maybe
people.
not.
Not people. Not like a person. One person can't do the job anymore. It's a collective. The Citizens Assembly idea, I'm very, very in love with. This idea of how we collectively create decisions about localized need, and there are people who I think are absolutely wonderful and wish they were in greater positions of power. I think there's a few musicians I could think of. There's a few brilliant leaders of environmental projects that I think are just so visionary. The woman who runs Julie's Bicycle, this incredible environmental agency in this country, Alison Tickell, she's a real hero of mine. Kate Rayworth, the donut economics woman. Oh my God, Caroline Lucas. Why is she not Prime Minister?
Yeah, gosh. So what are the qualities, like, do these people have anything in common that you can sort of identify that it makes you go, yeah, these would be my top picks if I had to name names?
They're trustworthy. They have their commitment is not about their own power. In fact, if anything, they are resistant to the power that is given to them because of how corrupting it can be. What politician hasn't been corrupted by the power that has been bestowed on them? Yeah. And I think that's one thing. I think a real sense of, for all of those people, about trying to create a different paradigm in which we exist.
Trust, that's a really big word, man. Yeah. Trustworthiness. And I guess you said something as well about we're gonna take the slightly more difficult road because it's the right thing to do, which I guess is another way of saying integrity, maybe. Trust and integrity then. Where would you retire to once you've kind of set this all up? Do you have a happy place? Is there a particular place in the world, in the country, that you'd return to?
Oh, well, I'm too young at age 44 to understand what retirement means, how that could be a thing. Most of the people, I love London.
Hey.
I just couldn't live without it. I'm a stimulation junkie. It's why I love being in big nature, because I love the stimulation of it. I'm not very good in like agricultural monoculture lands or suburbs. I love London. I love Sussex a lot. I like the communities in Sussex and Devon. Devon for me is. So I want to retire with a sort of solar powered luxury camper van and a really good tent. And I want to retire into a land where there's right to roam, where we can just go and walk and camp anywhere. I need to be by chalk streams. They're my favorite place in the world. The River Test, the
chalk streams are very specific.
Yeah, but
can you say why?
Well, they are the jewel in the crown of our ecology in this country, and they're the most holy and sacred places. They're rich in animal life, salmon and trout, and watercress beds, and ranunculus, and abundance like you can't imagine, and the cleanest, purest water where they're allowed to be able to be. So protecting our chalk streams is all of our rivers, but particularly our chalk streams is essential, absolutely. And I want to sort of be as an old man, just lying on the banks with my feet in the water, chilling and watching the mayflies dance and the salmon leap.
Just as music and art have the power to change hearts and minds, have the power to record humanity's journey with the earth through space and time, music and art have the power to make real world bottom line change happen too. So, like with Earth%, the music industry's climate foundation, which Sam mentioned, is a part of, along with a vanguard of other musicians and artists from established bands like Coldplay to emerging artists like Louis V.I. It's, to my mind, a wonderful manifestation of how this subtle mindset shift is making real-world change happen in the music industry and beyond. So by recognizing nature as an artist for the purposes of collecting royalties, among other things, Earth% helps raise money to green the music industry as well as fund environmental legal challenges and policy change. But it's also in this mindset shift that we can also start to kind of reacquaint ourselves, like meeting a high school sweetheart again in your adult life, with nature. Sorry, I say make that sound like it's a real life example. It's not, by the way. Moving on. So yes, to start reacquainting ourselves with nature as a life force, as a presence, as a being, which, just before I spill over into woo-woo territory, it taps into an emerging area of environmental law and movement for the rights of nature and legal personhood for natural features and species, etc. And just to give Sam the last word before I start to pack down this episode, at the heart of all of this is a dissolving of the sense of the other and reminding us that we are, as Sam puts it, a little bit nightingale, and nightingale is a little bit us. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let me know what you think. Comment on Spotify, on Instagram, or email me at podcast@gillianburkevoice.com. Follow the podcast so you get notified of new episode releases. And if you're listening on Apple, do me a favor and rate the podcast, as it really helps to bump it up on the recommendations lists. I'm guessing it does the same on Spotify too. I don't know. But you know what? More than any of that, let your friends, let your family know about the podcast, share this episode, dig into previous episodes. It brings me such joy and a sense of purpose being able to share these conversations with you guys. And this one in particular, the subtle but powerful system change conversation. Powerful because how we think and feel informs how we act and show up in the world. And music and art and articles and blog posts and videos and whatever it is you may be doing out there, singing, knitting, repairing, running, gardening, or just staring blankly into space. We're all a work of art, aren't we? So, take a moment and take a breath. Ask yourself, if I ruled the world, what would I do? Thanks for listening.
Red and rosy was his cheeks, and amber was his hair, and amber was his hair, and his two pretty eyes like diamond shine. My hands pass through his hair. It is 12 long months since first we met. So early in the spring, when the small birds they do whistle loud.